This Family Life News podcast is made possible by the support of listeners like you.
Next on the 5 o'clock report.
This is a breakthrough deal.
This is the exact framework of the deal I proposed back in May.
President Trump, the footsteps are being heard right now by Hamas. There's one thing the Middle East understands, and that's force.
We applaud the FDA.
It's the coldest January in a good decade.
When you have 3 days of cold weather in a row, a lot of bad things happen.
Now, let's go to the newsroom.
Good afternoon and welcome to the broadcast. I'm Family Life News anchor Sarah Harnish. There are celebrations in the streets of Israel today. A milestone reached in the war in Gaza, a ceasefire declared.
This is a breakthrough deal. It's also going to be incredibly difficult to implement.
It means an end to the fighting and the beginning of prisoner exchanges.
In the best case scenario, the first release would be by Sunday. You could then see 3 to 4 women released. But this is every few days. A little something here, a little something there. And remember, we were just 8 days into the last hostage deal when it all fell apart. The hope this time is that they can get to phase 2 and 3, and that you could eventually see a full-scale withdrawal of Israeli troops from Gaza. But that's a really big if.
President Biden issuing a rare address ahead of his farewell address tonight.
This is the exact framework of the deal I proposed back in May. Exact.
Pundits say Biden had 15 months to get this deal done, but it happened 5 days before Donald Trump took office. Last week, Trump told Hamas that, quote, they would pay if prisoners were not released before he took office.
This is classic Trump doctrine. He speaks strongly. He carries a big stick, as Teddy Roosevelt would say, and he wants to get things accomplished. He wants to push people across the line in negotiation.
Republican Steve Daines is on the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. He says the deal happened solely because of 2 people, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and Donald Trump.
Prime Minister Netanyahu, his maximum pressure campaign against Hamas as well as Hezbollah. And then you take President Trump, the footsteps are being heard right now by Hamas. There's one thing the Middle East understands, and that's force.
A little more on President Biden's farewell address. That's set for prime time tonight, days before he leaves the White House. His speech to be delivered from the Oval Office at 8 p.m. Eastern. Peter Doocy at Fox News says many of Biden's final acts have been through executive order and are controversial, to say the least.
Like pardoning Hunter Biden, commuting death row sentences, giving Hillary Clinton and George Soros medals of freedom, closing off new areas of drilling offshore, transferring prisoners out of Guantanamo Bay, giving more money to Ukraine, and taking Cuba off the state sponsor of terrorism list.
Biden is expected to reflect on his time in office and talk to the country about the future. A Senate committee is questioning 7 of Donald Trump's cabinet picks today. Marco Rubio on deck for Secretary of State if approved. CBS reporter Vicki Barker.
Some hecklers aside, Marco Rubio got a generally warm bipartisan welcome from his Senate colleagues, promising, if confirmed as Secretary of State, to work for
a strong and a confident America that engages in the world.
A chillier mood at Pam Bondi's confirmation hearing, ranking Democrat Dick Durbin accusing Trump's pick for Attorney General of blind loyalty to the president-elect.
He echoed his calls for investigating and prosecuting his political opponents.
Bondi pledging to end what she called the partisan weaponization of the Department of Justice.
California's on edge for yet another day. Winds gusting to 35 miles an hour this afternoon. The Eaton and Palisades fires are still not contained. LA City Fire Chief Kristen Crowley.
When you look at the aerial view of the Palisades fire, you may not be able to tell, but however, infrared flights last night indicated there are still numerous hot spots burning within the fire footprint.
The fires have damaged and destroyed schools there, too.
Nearly 6,000 students have remained out of school since the fire destroyed at least a dozen schools. And what I've heard from those students, from the parents, from the officials, is the importance of keeping a sense of normalcy. What that means at the LA Unified School District is keeping students together wherever they end up going to class.
A new study shows your drinking water isn't so drinkable.
Nearly a third of U.S. residents have been exposed to unregulated unregulated contaminants in their drinking water that could affect their health. That's according to a new analysis by scientists at what's called the Silent Spring Institute.
A big decision at the FDA today. Federal regulators just banned red dye number 3 from the American food supply 35 years after it was removed from cosmetics because it caused cancer in lab animals. Brian Ronhold is with Consumer Reports magazine.
We applaud the FDA for finally taking this action. I mean, this was an action that was way overdue. A strong case could be made that this was a step that could have been taken 35 years ago when they originally ruled on red dye 3 in cosmetics.
Red dye 3 is in Betty Crocker boxed foods, Nesquik, ibuprofen, maraschino cherries, Brock's candy, Entenmann's coffee cakes, toaster pastries, strawberry flavored milk, cans of fruit cocktail, cough syrup, soda, and Pedialyte for children. Still to come on the 5 o'clock report, the lowest temperatures in a decade on the way, but not yet. Reaction to Kathy Hochul's State of the State address and protecting your home from the cold. Those stories after weather with Kevin Williams.
For tonight, it'll be cold. We'll have some lake snow early, especially in the upper portions of western and central New York, a couple inches there. Elsewhere, just some clouds around and cold, low temps, teens for most. Tomorrow, turning out cloudy, light snow will arrive, high temperatures 20s. And Friday, clouds, some sun, a touch of snow, and a high temperature then into the 30s. A more potent system brings snow and some rain Saturday. It's followed by some extremely cold air as we head from Sunday into next week.
Hit the nail on the head. Thank you, Kevin. Checking the stories, making news where you live across New York and Pennsylvania. The weather, the lead story. That snow belt machine still cranking it out. There are lake effect snow warnings until 4 a.m. tomorrow for Erie, Wyoming, Cattaraugus, and Chautauqua counties.
We've already seen about 8 to 16 inches so far. Looks like some areas could top out at 2 feet.
The Family Life Newsroom already looking ahead, though. Pennsylvania and New York are both on deck for the coldest temperatures in a decade next week.
This January probably coming in as the coldest January in a good decade since 2014.
The question is, how low will we go?
I think we see mornings that are well back into the single digits. We see a couple spots that wake up below zero, and that's the air temperature, not the wind chill. So that's how cold it will be.
25 degrees today, 12 on Monday, and 5 or lower on Tuesday. An expert is offering tips to prevent damage to your home from the cold.
I think the worst is when you have 3 days of cold weather in a row, that just a lot of bad things happen.
Wayne Passenchen of Passenchen Plumbing and Heating in Pennsylvania says Rule 1, kitchens with outside walls, simply open the cabinet doors night and day.
We know there's faucets on an outside wall and a sink on an outside wall. So obviously opening cabinet doors to make sure some of the room heat gets into that cabinet base. The other thing, if you've known you've had leaks before, frozen pipes in the past, now's not the time, but come summer, get them removed, or relocated, insulated.
He also said double check to make sure every window is fully closed.
Where you have a window that may not be totally closed, make sure the latches are closed, make sure there's no air infiltration.
And get annual maintenance on your furnaces and radiators. Reaction is pouring in to Kathy Hochul's State of the State address on Tuesday. The governor wants a middle-class tax cut, help for first-time home buyers, and to make school meals free of charge.
I think this is a very important speech for her. She has been underwater with her polling numbers, meaning her negatives have exceeded her positives, her unfavorables have exceeded her favorables. That's encouraging some Democrats to start talking openly about challenging her in a primary.
Political pundit Carl Calabrese.
She's got to just stop the bleeding right now. I don't think there's anything she could do in one speech to get people to back off, but she needs editorial boards across the state to be editorializing that it was a good speech, good initiatives, and a good start to the new year. That's what she needs. At least put a pause on some of the open talk about taking her out next year.
Also in her State of the State speech yesterday, Hochul said she wants to codify abortion as protected emergency medical care. Buffalo Bills mania is at a fever pitch. There's a big game on Sunday between the Bills and the Ravens. One pizzeria in Buffalo is so convinced that the Buffalo Bills will win, they're giving people their money back if they lose. Chris Phillips is owner of Pesky's Pizza and Wings in Clarence.
What we decided to do is have a little fun with our staff and with our customers with the big game on Sunday. So Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, you order, pick up, and have delivered our large and 20 wing special, our large and pound of boneless wing special on those 3 days. And hopefully we're going to win on Sunday. But If they don't come through and they lose, and then Monday morning we got to get up here and send out some e-gift cards to cover the costs on all those orders.
A little love for Bills fans ahead of the big AFC divisional round game in Orchard Park. Next at 5, before the pandemic shutdown, 7% of older adults were reporting significant stress. Now that number has leapt to 10% of seniors. Our Real Answers counselor Chris Anderson says the reason many older people are struggling isn't due to COVID, but because of other forms of feeling isolated. Let's listen in.
Here in the United States, our lifestyle, if you want to call it our affluence, has given us the ability to spread out. Mm-hmm. You might have family that live in California. If you're from the East Coast and vice versa over here, you don't have the luxury of popping over real quick to sit with somebody or going to buy somebody's groceries or support somebody with your physical presence. Right. And so with folks that are in their senior years, their golden years, that can translate into having fewer folks that can physically be there to monitor their safety or to meet their needs.
We've seen recent stats about during that pandemic how young people really struggled with isolation. It left a lasting impact on them, and seniors are certainly suffering a lot of that as well when they're already kind of up against it as seniors.
Yeah, and you're right, and Mark, and another form of isolation is, we can call it technological isolation. Some of the folks that are in their later years of life, all the technology that is changing at just an absolutely rapid pace is really intimidating. Some folks might have a much easier time staying connected through electronics, but sometimes the folks that are senior citizens aren't necessarily as well versed in how to use all this stuff.
Left in the dust, left behind.
See, this is where churches have historically and need to once again make sure they're on their game at meeting the needs of folks that are not able to get to services or participate in other activities, especially if their families live far away, where churches can be very creative in developing ministries that really reach out to the community and meet these needs, and then encourage their members to say, folks, here's a need, here's our circumstance in our community. We need folks to be willing to step up and plug in to help meet the needs of these seniors in our community, and whether they're attending the church or not. The church really, and it is biblical, they are tasked to do this.
You can subscribe, listen to, and share the Real Answers with Chris Anderson podcast and all of Family Life's original podcasts at Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, or FamilyLife.org. Time next for tonight's market report, brought to you by Faithward Advisors. Wall Street is closing with stocks sharply higher. It comes after a key report showed inflation slowed last month. At the final bell, the Dow Jones Industrial Average gained 703 points to 43,221. The S&P 500 rose by 107 points to 5949, and the NASDAQ gained 466 points to 19,511. Faithward Advisors is a Christian financial planning firm online at faithwardadvisors.com.
2 Timothy 3:16 reads, "All Scripture is breathed out by God and profitable for teaching, for reproof, for correction, and for training in righteousness." I'm Rob West with another Faith and Finance Minute. That verse establishes the Bible as the ultimate source of truth, and it's a reminder that we should never misuse Scripture. One way we do that is by using a verse out of context, stretching it to make a point. Another way is by missing the deeper meaning. For example, Proverbs 13:22 reads, "A good man leaves an inheritance to his children's children." That's not just about leaving money to our children. An inheritance of wisdom is even more precious. Memorizing Bible verses is a noble venture. Understanding them is even better. Get biblical answers to your financial questions in the Faith Fi community. Download Faith Fi, Faith and Finance in your app store or visit faithfi.com.
Coming up on the 5 o'clock report, the Pennsylvania man that built a roller coaster in his backyard. No joke. That story after weather with Kevin Williams.
Some lake effect snow and flurries will be shifting from south to north across the region this evening, exiting out over Lake Ontario. That process will give another inch or so of snow to some areas, then just some clouds overnight tonight, the low in the teens. Now Thursday will end up cloudy. Some light snow will arrive from west to east through the course of the day. Again, small accumulations, an inch or two in places. Little moderation in temperatures over the next couple of 3 days, although that moderation will be brief. For tomorrow, the high 22 to 27. And into the 30s we go Friday with clouds, a bit of sun, and a few scattered flakes.
Thank you, Kevin. Finally at 5, some people build swing sets in their backyard, but one Columbia County, Pennsylvania man has taken that a step further. Michael Chorba has an entire roller coaster on his property.
Some people collect or buy antique cars and fix them up. This is very similar. It's just a lot more fun.
He built the roller coaster for his grandkids, but it might be in violation of local zoning laws.
Ultimately, if it fails, they would fine me. And at that point, I would have to, disassemble and try to find a new buyer for the coaster.
Chorba's awaiting word from the Mount Pleasant Zoning Board to see if he gets to keep the roller coaster in his backyard, building his own joy in Columbia County, Pennsylvania. And that's the world that we live in for Wednesday, the 15th of January. I'm Sarah Harnish, and this is the 5 o'clock report on Family Life.
Thank you for listening to this Family Life News podcast. If you've been encouraged by what you've heard, please share it with others and click the subscribe button to automatically receive future episodes. Family Life is a listener-supported ministry. Podcasts like this are made possible by your financial partnership. Find out more at familylife.org.